Transitioning Humanitarians, live every Thursday. Hi, Viki.
Hi, Asel. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here again this Thursday.
Yes, great to be here and great to be talking to you about the topic of fearing lack of adrenaline or lack of those excitement, those intense feelings that we get to experience as humanitarians, and then how to do about them once we leave the humanitarian world, right? So if we decide to do that, then what if we won't get that type of experience anymore, and how can we replace with something else, or how to deal with that? So that's really the topic that we were discussing, and it's a perfect timing to do that as well, considering we both have our own life's journey of where we are at, right? So, like we were talking before, that Viki is in her life journey where she's saying she's not really needing that type of travel and the excitement of that type, while I had recently my own excitement and my own survival story. So that's why I think it's a great way we can introduce and talk about it. So maybe the first question, Viki, we can address is why I guess why we feel like if we leave the humanitarian world, we won't have that exciting and,
Yeah.
like adrenaline fueled life in back home or wherever we decide to settle. What do you think?
Yeah. Sorry. I think it's a good question because I remember thinking back, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, when I came back from assignment and I would come back home and I would come back to meet my friends and family. And whilst it was super exciting and I was super happy to be back home, I was looking at their lives with a bit of a horror, because I said, I can never come back and live here because I cannot have this routine life. I consider it so boring. But then, and then as time progressed, I started, and I was traveling a lot until I think maybe a bit too much. I still love travel, not to say that I don't love travel, but really more for pleasure and targeted and like savoring it rather than something super intense and super heavy.
Yeah.
But just to say that I do feel that this is one of the reasons that aid workers find it a bit scary, to really come back and say, "Oh, but this is not the way I want to live," which is absolutely fine. I think most of us don't want to live boring lives, right? And they don't want to have repetitive. We want to have diversity in our work, in our lives. So I think this is one of the fearful moments. What about you? What do you think?
Yes, I was thinking that one is definitely like boring routine that we believe that we will have if we return. And I don't know why we believe that, but this is like the image that we immediately have, right?
Yeah.
And then we also are looking back at our lives of being in the humanitarian world and being exposed to risks and different dangers and challenges. Then we're like, no, I don't want to be there either. And then I feel like we are, we end up putting ourselves in this edge of not really belonging to where we want to go and
Yeah.
not really wanting to be where we are now, and then staying in this in between zone of, okay, what am I
Mhm.
going to do then, right? So, and then of course whenever we are in that zone of not really knowing what to do and how to navigate it, we always go back to what we know best, because our brains
Yeah.
are scared of the uncertainty, right? So that's why I would say that whenever we have this type of like thinking of routine is bad, and like whatever the judgments we have about people who are living
Mhm.
their lives differently than we tended to live, then maybe it's a great time to ask ourselves is also, what is it that we want our life to be? And it could be different than the ones that we know. It could be a combination of us traveling in, being in one place, or traveling, like Viki was saying, for savoring, for enjoying, or for exploratory purposes, and not so much for work or for like being sent to some
Mhm.
places, right?
Yeah.
Which we may not necessarily choose. So that's why I think exploring that would be good. And the other thing that I think is like what I'm exploring for myself as well after being away so often, and now my like routine life I feel like is going to start, is I'm exploring for myself also the question of why do I believe that adrenaline and all of this intense excitement comes only from traveling or only from being
Yeah,
in that environment, right? Because I know that all of these feelings generated by me, so why do I think that it can only be generated in the circumstances? It can also be generated
yeah,
in the current life that I'm building, whatever the way I call it. So exploring that, I think, would be also important to see what else can generate the similar feelings or similar ideas of being alive and being adventurous and being exploratory
yeah.
without putting yourself in that environment.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you because it's one of the things I explore also with people I work with. What is it that to breaking it down really? What activities? What is it that gives you the buzz? What is it that gives you the excitement? It can be travel, it can be going to new places, but as you said, you can do it as a part of being a traveler, right? Like once a year or twice a year. It can be other activities. It can be this is not to promote bungee jumping, but it could be bungee jumping. Not that something it's something I would do, but it could be that. It could be concerts or listening to music. So really understanding in greater depth what activities or what situations give you this buzz. Because even when we are on assignment, there is a sort of a regularity. There is a monotony. There is a there is quite a lot of habit. You need to go mostly to the office, or if you don't go to the office, you go on a field trip. But there is also you go also to certain homes. So maybe exploring this a little deeper. I think for me, it's also the lack of the fact that I'm able to create my own schedule. So it's
Yeah.
not like someone else, unless there is a meeting, external meeting, or of course we agree with clients on the hours, but it's every day it's different. So my life right now, there is no similarity. One day I can go to the office. The other day I stay here. Then I go on a business trip, and then or I do coaching. I walk my dog in between. So it's not phenomenally grandiose things, but it like I don't feel monotony. It's never the same. So really exploring a little bit into greater detail, what is it that gives you buzz, and how could that be translated into a potential life that you are creating? How could this life be as you are creating it?
Yes, exactly. And also the other thing that comes to my mind is that I know that we get like our brains chemically get so used to this
Yeah,
intense emotions, right? Because they are very addictive, and that's why we tend to be so chasing after like fearful adventures or chasing after adventures that make us feel alive, or many of us may be chasing after happiness or too excited because otherwise we feel like we're not really living our lives, or it's not worth living our lives, or whatever the way that we
yeah,
explain ourselves. And just notice that whenever you are chasing, or like you are having this urge to be always reacting and going and exploring, I feel like it can never stop unless you sit with that urge. In other
yeah.
words, you can keep following that urge by, going on
Mhm.
adventures, going on assignments, going on risks, and all of this. And then as soon as you stop, your brain wants to do that even more because
Yeah,
the hype is so addictive, right?
yeah,
The emotion is so, like, our brains get so hungry for it, and then the only way that we can stop is actually by counteracting it, by sitting with all of those things of like, okay, this is the intense emotions that I'm experiencing, or the lack of it. Oftentimes, right, we're
yeah,
experiencing lack of it and we feel like we're hungry, we need something, we're craving. And in those craving
yeah,
moments, it's best to just stay with them instead of reacting to them. And then
yeah,
once you are in this really, like, what many people would call a boring state, or the state where you're not doing anything, but you're just sitting with it. And that's when you can sit with it and then notice what's going on within you. You may also realize that you keep just avoiding something else,
Yeah.
right? Whatever the
Yeah. Yeah.
emotion that you could be avoiding.
Totally.
And that's important to notice and understand it. For instance, one of the things that I remember for myself is that I was avoiding feeling sad. I was avoiding feeling alone with myself. And that's why I always needed to go and explore, go and do something else, go and whatever, right? So, and once I learned to be alone with myself, with my boring mind, and then I'm like, okay, I can do that. I can be with myself. Then many other opportunities started opening up for me that I mean, getting to know myself basically, instead of always reacting to the external world.
Yeah, that's a super point. I was about to mention the same, that sometimes there is sort of escaping from something deeper inside, deeper inside us, that wants to or needs to come out. I also wanted to mention that as I was conducting the research, where with humanitarians that have left the sector or are leaving the aid sector, actually, one of these, I also ask one of these questions, like, have you had this feeling of that you're missing something? And I have to say that out of probably about 2% of people said that every now and then the urge comes, like, oh, I wish to be on an adventure, on a field trip. But actually, what they say, what they clarified, is that whenever this comes, it's always because they want to escape a situation. Like they had a row with the partner, and they just for a moment want to flee this moment and
Yeah,
go into this fantastic world that they used to live. And also not realizing at that moment that they have a wonderful world now, and then this just a different stage of their life. And so really, I have to say that nobody, let's say, regrets this decision of leaving when the time comes, when they realize, because this transition to a different life that you're creating is more conscious. It brings loads of other things. So that's also one of the things I would like to mention. And I would like to also mention also my example, where I believe that lots of aid workers, just like myself, and I'm pretty sure you too, Asel, is that we have a high value around adventure. So as you mentioned, that we can find the adventure, there's always something that you love to, you're curious, you just love to explore. And what I really actually started doing, and in the last 2 years since I moved back to my country, is that, I actually didn't know my country so well, or it actually has changed so much in the last 20 years that I have actually become tourist in my own country. And there are places, like, I would say that I know Baghdad better than I know probably rest of the country, rest of the cities, because I haven't even been to those parts. So it is a great opportunity of different learning and different exploration. If you just sort of open your mind to the possibility.
exactly. And
Yeah,
also, maybe the other thing to mention as well is that it always depends on how we tell our stories to ourselves.
yeah,
And we often, I think, tend to tell our stories, especially if we're not satisfied with what we're having, or we're having challenges back home. We tend to get to the story of, oh, you see, if it was somewhere else, it would have been better, or it would have been different, or it would have been, I don't know, I would be doing this, right? So be careful when you're telling yourself these kind of stories, just because you are in these challenging moments, which will happen no matter where we live, right? So it doesn't depend on, like, just because we moved back, or just because we stayed in the humanitarian world, we are saved of the challenges. That's not the case. So that's why
yeah,
notice that whenever the challenges, don't tell yourself a story that it would have been better somewhere else, because that's just your way of saying that you don't want to be here and you want to be escaping, right? And whenever
yeah,
we are in that
yeah,
escaping narrative, let's say, then we don't really want to be looking at what's happening now. We don't want to address it and look at it. At the same
yeah,
time, we are not really there either. So, right. So that's why
yeah,
I tell myself that what is the story I want to tell myself now when I'm having challenges, right? So I can choose many different stories. It's up to me. I can sit and say, okay, poor me, I'm living my ordinary life, or whatever the way I choose to tell myself, or I can choose to tell myself, no, this is the life that I wanted. This is how I wanted to do this. I'm exploring other ways to live my life that is not related to being in the war zone or surviving, and that's actually what I wanted. So how do I want to do it differently? How do I want to create things, or what is it that I'm missing, that, or what is the feeling that I'm missing that I want to have by experiencing XYZ, right? So that's why I was just today actually I was telling myself this as well, as like a lot of the things that my brain comes up is just so many different stories to choose from, and depending on what I choose and where I focus, my brain then goes off to saying how great it is, or my brain goes off to saying, oh no, that's not how I want, right? So that's why, yeah. So anything that else that we could mention in terms of people who are making decision about whether to transition and how to do and what to do with the adrenaline. Anything else that we should mention, Viki, for them to be useful?
Yeah, no, you know what I'm also mentioning, what I'm also thinking is that this little bit falls into the similar category of questions that, oh, I can never transition because I cannot reintegrate into society. And that's a little bit linked with that, because whenever we go back to our countries or home places, we don't have the feeling of belonging. And the feeling of belonging is somewhere where we are on assignment. And this is a very, very important part that is a human need, is a basic human need to belong, to be part of the community. And so it's also a decision. I belong to which community do I belong? To belong to humanitarian community, we can just also define it for ourselves. I'll belong to large humanitarian community or development or nonprofit, and that's great. But on the other hand, also it's important to create a sense of belonging in where you're transitioning to, so that you don't get this feeling of escaping, because it's so, that is also linked with the sense of adrenaline I'm feeling, or sense of adventure, that it somehow is, you say to yourself when you are in these countries that, oh no, I can't do this because I can never integrate. So I do belong, that this is also, I do think, sorry, that it's another subject that we need to sort of ponder on, about the belonging. Where do I want to belong?
Yeah.
And I remember I'm mentioning in particular that for myself, I had some of my core values are strangely contradictory, because I have a stability and safety is one of my core values, but also adventure. And they sort of, I always have to find a balance between them. So I wanted to offer this perspective as well, if it may speak to someone.
Exactly. In terms of belonging and integrating, I feel like I have done so many of that in my, student life, and then afterwards, and
Yeah.
like living most of my life in foreign countries. And what I have realized more and more as I get more experience, and maybe as I get older as well, is the fact that we often believe that I belong does not really depend on us. It's somehow like it needs to be depending on external circumstances, other people. If they are welcoming, then I will feel belonging, otherwise not. Right? So we often believe that. And to an extent I can see how that could be true in our experiences. But what I would love to offer to you all is to think about what if belonging depended on us individually, meaning that I have the willingness to belong, or I have the desire to belong, I have the desire to integrate. And these are the ways that I want to do that, right? So, I mean, it could be many different things like activities with friends, or finding new friends, getting to know your neighbors, or however the way that you socialize. But notice that it's a different way of acting when you are in charge of how you can belong, how you can take actions to belong or to integrate, versus expecting your external like community or whoever inviting you or telling you come along, and then like taking a passive role, so to say, may not really work for many people. So that's why I would love for you to think about, okay, if it really depended on me, how would I want to do that? How do I know that I belong now? How do I know that I am integrated, right? This is one of the like questions I like asking myself, especially here in Italy, is what is that sense of me integrating? Is it speaking the language, or is it knowing XYZ people, or is it like calling up a friend and going for coffee? How do I really know that I integrate myself? And these are the reflections you can ponder, and then also not jump the gun too quickly to say, okay, I have tried and things didn't work, and everyone is this and everyone is that, which I know I could also many times sit and say that, like, oh, people are not really welcoming because I don't speak their language or whatever it is. But then I don't really find the use in it, because it feels like then I will be just sitting and complaining and like telling myself, oh, poor me, no one is um, allowing me join their club, right? I don't find that useful. So that's why I rather go and find other friends in the same environment. So that's why I feel like a lot can be done by us individually as to how we want to belong, what that means for us, how we want to establish new networks in the place where we are, in addition to whatever the networks that we already know. And that's amazing as well, right? So that's why don't like tell yourself the story that, oh, only my humanitarians would understand me and here no one understands me, because I think that can also like kill the joy a bit of being where you are, and then like telling yourself stories that may not really be useful for you. So that's why choose what you tell yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Vicky, that we forgot to mention?
I
I'm looking at
think,
my
you know,
notes.
maybe less is more sometimes. Fear if our humanitarian and development colleagues fear that this is a real concern, that like I really am fearful to create a new life and leave the aid sector, because I mean, how could I live without adventure? I would really like to encourage colleagues then to break it down into really understanding what is it, which situation, which moments bring you the buzz, the excitement, and see then how could these then translate into other parts of your life, and how could you recreate this in a different life? Because as you mentioned, there are loads of things that you could. There's a loads of fun and loads of excitement you can have with in community, in a group of friends, that we sometimes think it's only in the outside, in the aid world, but actually you can have equal amounts of fun in the communities or with your friends. That is going to be super exciting. But because we haven't had this experience for so many years, we forget that this could be possible too. So yeah, those will be my 2 cents on this.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And maybe the last one is also to notice that, Vicky and I are not trying to convince you to move out of the
yeah,
humanitarian sector, right? So I think we often say that it's not our mission to tell you that you should do or either or. You can do both, or you should choose whichever the one you want to. What I think we're really advocating for is that don't stop yourself from transitioning to home or to places that you want to, just because you think your life will be boring or not exciting, and therefore
yeah,
you just keep being in the environment that you don't want and in the environment that you think is
yeah,
not really for you, right? So that's why we wanted to show you how it could be on the side of if you decided to leave the humanitarian sector, and how that could look like. And it could equally be exciting and full of adrenaline, or a quiet life, whichever the way that you decide to choose
yeah,
and decide to design it for yourself. So that's why all we want to advocate is that being conscious about how you can
Yeah.
be in charge of creating that life, right? How you can create those emotions, whichever the ones that you're wanting. You can do that both in the life after transitioning to somewhere else or in the life of staying in the humanitarian world.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so having said that, thank you so much, Viki. Thank you, everyone, for watching us and yeah, sharing, I guess, allowing us to share our perspectives of how things
Yeah.
are and how transition can be. And we will see you next Thursday. And until then, stay safe. Let
Yeah.
us know if you have questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Asel, everyone. Great that you are following us. And yeah, see you next Thursday. And thank you.
Yes, thank you. Bye.